It's really lucky to have so many people here. One of the weather, and we have Han with us, who's a frequent visitor of our seminar. We're very happy with that, and he's going to give us an overview of social physics models and some perspectives on new ideas. So, please take it away.
Yeah, so this is a bit of an improvised talk. I decided last week to do this, but I tried to put some things together, and actually the reason also to put it together is that we hope to get some money as a community here from the university and RPA on formal models for inequality, segregation, and polarization. And we're still waiting for the decision, but we are optimistic. And that means at some point, quite some people that are involved in this RPA sitting here, yeah, we have to work together on this idea of making formal models of these social processes. And that's formal, so that's why this is interesting for people with interest in knowledge about statistical physics. And at the same time, we have to make the connection to social science, social data. And I thought it was good to give an attempt to summarize a bit what formal models are out there. And I just will go into the basics of these models because I try to give an overview. And then I will go also in some new ideas I'm thinking on, but these are really new ideas, not really ready, but I can probably use some input. So I also put them on the slides actually to see what you think about these things. I work at the psychological methods. This is the most quantitative group that you can have in psychology. So we have a background normally in statistics, methods. But over the years, I developed a strong interest in complex system theory. And have been a founder here of EIS, and I'm, for instance, also an external faculty member of the Santa Fe Institute. Yeah, so social physics, as I like to call it, but probably better is it to call it computational social science. It's of course not really a field. I'm a psychologist, so I also try to read in this field, and that helps me, of course, to give this overview. I'm writing a book, finishing a book about complex systems research in psychology, and there's one chapter about social physics, and that's actually the background of the overview I give here. There are many books to read actually here. Actually, there's one big paper that I think, especially if you have a background in statistical physics, you should absolutely read this paper, Castellano et al. 2009. It's a bit outdated, but still it's a fantastic overview of this field. And my overview is quite similar to is largely based on that overview. So I just go over some models, and actually I leave out also many models. You also have models from, say, pedestrian dynamics and all these fields. I leave that out for now. I'm just saying some big models that you absolutely have to know about, and then I talk only the basics. So one very famous one is the Grammar-Vetter threshold model, and also known as the bandwagon effect. And this I always like in my lecture. I always give this little video where one guy is dancing on some festival, and everyone is ignoring him. And 10 minutes later, everybody joins him, and everybody jump on this bandwagon. It's a nice, funny example. It's very simple to model this type of effects, and that's actually what Gano-Vetter a bit. He has written two famous papers. I think Spoke and Weak ties in social networks are very famous. It seems to be the best cited paper in the history of social sciences, 10,000, I think 100,000 times or something. But also his work on the threshold model is very much cited. And what he actually showed, that the model is really simple. It just says that everybody has a personal threshold. So this guy is dancing, and you're not going to dance, you're not you're not silly, but as you have a personal bound, let's say 50% of people dance, okay, you also start dancing. Let's go with it. And everybody has you sample these bounds from a beta distribution, and then given the parameters of the beta distribution, you get either that nobody dances or there is a first order phase transition to everyone dances. So that's basically the model. Super simple. And of course, since then, this is 1978, well studied, and people have done many different things like heterogeneous bounds, these personal thresholds. They can be dynamic, they can be stochastic. You can have all kinds of spatial and temporal dependencies in these threshold models. You can have cost-benefit analysis, non-binary, multidimensional choices. Yeah, you can easily see that from here you can develop a whole bunch of models. So this is one tradition. Next, segregation. The segregation is also a huge field, but the most famous basic model that exists is the Schelling model. The Schelling model, proposed this model also a long time ago. And the model is really simple. It starts with a 2-day lattice, and cells, people have either, in this case, orange or blue, or white. White is an unoccupied cell, so people can actually move from location to free locations. And the idea is that they count the number of neighbors, they look in their local neighborhood how many friends they have, so how many people have the same color, and they have a certain tolerance. So suppose this tolerance is 30%, or actually it's intolerance. So they have an intolerance of 30%. That means that they can accept up to 30% of different people in their local environment. And then you can do this in a simple computer simulation. And what he actually showed in this famous paper is that even low levels of intolerance, so high level of tolerance, already lead to segregation. And that actually is a very robust phenomenon. Because of course, again, you can complicate this model in many different ways, but this basic result is a very stable effect. So whatever you do, on these, even high levels of tolerance for other people in your local neighborhood already lead to segregations, which is a bit of depressive result. And extensions are in multiple groups, so you can easily do this with 3, 4, 5, whatever number of colors. You can add economic factors. That's actually a big thing and interesting, because that would be a connection between inequality research and segregation research. You can add noise to the system, dynamic preferences, other topologies, racial segregation. So there's a lot done starting from this model. That was segregation. So I go fast. Another one, also famous, is the formal modeling of language, evolution of language, and the root model here is the naming game. And the naming game is a game where it works as follows. So we all speak different languages. You have actually you have no language at this point, and you see a new thing, let's say this thing, and you come up with some name. For instance, a number. Give it my name is 2, and yours is 3, and we all choose some random names. And now we talk to each other, and then I speak to you, I say 2, you don't know 2. So what we actually then do is you add 2 to your vocabulary. So now you have 2 and 3. And this happens all the time. So in first instance, all these vocabularies grow and grow. But whenever I spoke to you, and I say a word that you already have, so I say 3, and you also have 3 in your vocabulary is on this, then you delete your whole vocabulary, me too, and you only have left 3. So we go on with an empty one except 3. And you can show that if you run this, then initially you have a fast increase of the number of words in the whole systems. And then you have a long period where actually not much happens. And then you get again a first order phase transition to actually convert it to one name. So this is a very basic approach to study. And actually, you can even further simplify it by having only 2 possible words. And then you can even write it down in different equations and show, for instance, in this case, that the 2-word case, that a coexistence of 2 of the A and B word together is an unstable state. So that's one of the simple things you can do. And again, you can easily see that you can extend this in many ways. I must say, in many of these cases, the area, the whole model space where you can do analytical things is rather limited. So you can easily into the area that you have to go to computer simulation. So this even simpler case, then you can do some analytical things, but the original one is all simulation work.
So Han, can I ask a quick question about
that?
I mean, you say there are two word cases unstable, but that's only when you have a lot of assumptions, I would say. No? I mean, if you have a spatial.
Yeah, no, this is a fully connected case.
Fully connected. Everyone talks to it.
Yeah, this means, yeah. And indeed, as soon as you do some model topology, it's then. Yeah. Actually, in this paper of Castellano, he goes quite in depth in this specific case. And then in these papers, it also talked about, they said something at the convergence time, in this case, also power law, and they looked for different topologies at convergence times. All these things have been investigated. Okay, next one, also very famous, the Axelrod model of cultural evolution. That's one I like a lot. And this model is really simple. So what we have is everybody has a number of properties, features, and here there are 5, and each feature has a number of categories. And in this case, there are 3. So we have 5 properties, and the values are A, B, and C. And also, again, this is normally studied in a fully connected world. So I meet someone, for instance, I'm agent 1, my values are A, B, C, A, B. I meet someone. And that gives me the probability that I change one of my unequal properties to you. So that means that if they are completely different, nothing will happen, or that probably be 0. But if you already share a lot of properties, then the probability is higher that I actually change one of my remaining properties to you. And now you can look how this converges for different values for F and for the number of properties and the number of categories. And for instance, this is the case with 4 features, and each feature has 4 categories, and then it always converges to the same cultural system. So everybody ends up with the same pattern. But for instance, for F is 2 and Q is 10, then you normally convert to something like 10 populations. And of course, you can do this in a larger simulation to see how the whole equilibrium, how the whole phase space looks for different values for F and Q, and that's also done again and again. I like this model also because we know from research in polarization that in models I work on, I often have only one property. And if you look at, for instance, the situation in the United States, it's very important that in polarization that people polarization gets dangerous actually when people differ, if all the dimensions of life get correlated. So that means that in the United States, Republicans, they go to different sports, different supermarkets, they live in different places, so they are different on all aspects, and then getting together to one, to converge to some group is very hard, and that's something that can be easily studied in the Axelrod model. And again, people have done many things, affecting all kinds of noise, different small world scale free graphs, media, ordered states, continuous opinions, external fields. So again, this is just a starting point of a whole field of research. Then I go a bit to the opinion models. So that's a subspace of social physics, and that's all about opinions. The simplest model that you can think of is the photo model. And the photo model, Sid Redknapp gave a talk about it about a year ago when he was here. And the basic photo model is just this. People have 2 possible positions, up and down, or whatever, red and blue. And whenever I meet you, I meet Wout, and then I just copy your position. So I have no resistance to anybody's position. I talk to you, and I just, okay, that's a good idea. I just take your position. That's it. So you randomly meet people, fully connected, and you always copy people's opinion. And then one basic result that you can show that if you start with some initial probability, so say you start this thing with 60% ones and 40% minus ones, and you run it, and it converges with the same probability to, it always converges to a state of only ones and only minus ones. And this, the outcome probability is equal to the start probability in the configuration. So that's actually something you can show them. Yeah. So that's nice. So here, if you keep it like this, you can still do analytical work, and that's why this model is one of the reasons why it's so popular. But you can of course easily change things. One thing is that you can. Now I always take over your position, but I can also put the probability on that, and that can also be individual variation in there, etc., etc.
You think like intuitive understanding why it's 60 over 40?
If you start the start config with 60 over 40, it ends with 60, in 60% cases go for all ones, and 40%. So that I'm not so clear. So I start with the configuration of 60% ones and 40% minus ones, and then I let it run. And then in 60% of cases, it will convert to all ones.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering whether there's significance to that number.
No, if I do 70-30%, it will be 70-30%. So the initial probability determines the convergence outcome.
The conversion rate, like if you replicate the experiment multiple times,
yes,
the frequency is there.
Yeah, and that's actually you can do the simulation, but it's very easy to show this.
I mean, it comes to mind that this is a non-reciprocal system, not? I mean, you actually respond to.
But that's not how you do it. So I talk to you, and then that's one turn. I take your position, and then that's the end of it. You do something, and then you talk to someone.
I also could talk to you, and actually I talk to you, but that's a random.
Yeah, then it would be the extraction. Yeah. But that's not what they do.
Okay.
There's a speaker and a hearer here. Now let's go to here some extensions. Actually, this SIT-RETNA has a really nice paper. That's the website the page shown there. You can look, of course. One thing that will be important later in my talk is that you can have also three groups. So what he studied is the case that you have leftist people, centrist people, and rightist people. And people in the extremes don't talk to each other, so that if they interact, nothing happens. But centrist people, they move with some probability to the extreme positions when they talk to a more extreme person. And that's still a case you can do analytically, largely. And of course, you can have median nodes, and actually this is just a starting point of not only variations of the photo model, but actually also all very different discrete opinion models. So you can take just also the basic IC model. So that's not that you talk to one person, but you look in a local neighborhood, and then you can take a majority vote, probabilistic eventually. You can have the Gala model. The Gala model that's shown here. The Gala model is actually the idea that we come to an opinion, so we vote in groups of three persons about something, and then we take the majority, and we do this in all groups of three, and then we make clusters of groups of three, and we do their majority vote, and then their majority vote. But this hierarchical voting, that's famous in the Gala model. He's a guy from statistical physicist from Paris, I think. We should invite him maybe once. I heard he's quite a character. Social impact theory, I will go in that, but Snap model, there are many variants of this basic principle, and again, each of these models have been worked out in many different papers. Yeah, the social impact model is one of the models that's most tied to social psychology, and I'm a psychologist, so this is based on Latané's theory of social impact. And in his theory, it's the case that there's an influence of people that agree with you, and there's an influence of people that disagree with you, and that can be different. And that's what's done here. So opinions are either discrete, and you have to feel a certain impact, and this impact is a function of the persuasiveness of your of opponents and supportiveness of supporters and distance. So he puts it also in a grid. But people that are far away have less effect on you than the people that are close. That's putting this distance. Now, yeah, you can put this in this equation, run it, and the qualitative effect they have in these papers, and they're quite interesting papers, is that you have this staircase model. So if you let it run, you see that at some point it gets stuck for a long time in a certain situation, and then suddenly it makes a new move. In the end, it also converges mostly to one state. So either all1 or -1. This happens in quite long periods of stability, and then again a new staircase jump, and then it stays there. So we see this in this graph. The staircase behavior I've seen in this model, but I don't know. I'm curious whether in some statistical physics models we see this staircase behavior somewhere. Okay. But that's the social impact model. And it's one of the ones that best connected also to a lot of data in social psychology.
Is there an invariant distribution of this thing? Steady state or something like that? Actually, always go to 1 here?
Yes, in principle it is, but it depends a bit on this age parameter here. Okay. There is so they have this was first developed by the psychologists, but they work together with people in statistical physics, and they wrote 1 or 2 really technical papers, and they are great papers actually. So I can easily find these papers back, and there all the results are. And there's also some analytical work on this approach.
In statistical physics, they call these modulated systems. There are specific Ising coupling that it leads to this.
Okay. Okay. Let me know about it. Yeah. Okay. Then we have another tradition. So you could say that the field of opinion models, statistical physics of opinions, the 2 main branches are the models that go into the direction of discrete opinions, which we just handled more or less. The other one is the continuous model. So their opinion is just a continuous trait from -1 to 1 or from -infinity to infinity. And then you can have all kinds of models. Actually, this is not the first model, but the base model there is called the Groot model. In the Groot model, the idea is that when people meet, they find each other somewhere in the middle. So they are nice people, and if they talk, they find it. And then in the Groot model, actually nothing interesting happens. So there's just convergence. If the network is sufficiently connected, of course. So if it's sufficiently connected, you get really boring behavior. To get interesting behavior, you have to add something important that's called bounded confidence or homophily. And that's the idea that there is some boundary, and this boundary means that if J is too different from me, so if it's more than 0.4 in my simulation here, I don't talk to you. I ignore you. So there is a bound, this is called bounded confidence. So you don't talk to people that are too far away from you. And of course you can change this bound. That's what I did here. So here the bound is quite large, and then it still converges to 1 opinion. But if you increase this bound, you get different kinds of equilibria in this case. And that's quite important model. It's very simplistic, but this bounded confidence is quite a good idea. It's quite clear that this is a big issue in understanding polarization, that it's really a realistic thing. People indeed refuse to talk to people that are totally different from each other. And so even so I think this is quite an important one, and this model is so basic that you can do many different things. Although I must say most things also here are simulations. One famous thing here is that if you have open-minded agents, so here in this case everybody has the same bound. So the bound is equal to everybody. Now you can also say, no, I sample these bounds from a normal distribution. If the same 0.4, like, oh, that's a pity, there's no 0.4, but okay. I should have taken something else, but then you said you sample these bounds with some variant. So J might have an open-minded guy, so he has a big, he likes to talk to many people. That seems to be really good to decrease polarization. So you get less polarization if there are people in your system that are open-minded. That's one of the famous results in this line of research. And again, you can do this in many different ways. Actually, the most famous one is the Hexagon-Krauss model. That paper is also cited thousands and thousands of times. And this is just a little simulation of that model. It's a little bit different from the model I just showed. And again, the threshold model is, of course, also the dancing model I showed is also related to this type of models. Now, I like to go a little bit into our own work line. Just to zoom out, there's, what you already can see from this, this short overview is that if you think about it, the standard explanation of polarization, and that's the thing that we are interested here now, is of course disconnected network or lack of connections in networks. This bounded component seems to be a very important one. A little thing I just said is that most of these models assume that whenever people talk, they're reasonable and they find each other somewhere in the middle. But of course, if you assume that interactions actually lead to more extremity, then you get very easily polarization in any system. And self-confirmation is another one that's known to be a mechanism of, and that's actually not a complete list, but these are all standard explanation of polarization. And I thought, let's add another one. So then I go a little bit into our own work, a little bit shortly, because I want to go through some new ideas. But you need to know this then. What we do from our perspective is say that all these models, agent-based models of opinion dynamics, they have a very simplistic model of the agent. The agent was just a discrete thing, -1, or a continuous trait. Let's complicate this and put some more psychology in the agent. That's basically the idea. And we have a whole theory about opinions at the psychological level, and that's work that we did in the last 10 years. And it's a bit confusing because now we talk again about IC-type models, but now on the level of the individual. So this is not an interaction model between persons, this is our model for how we think about attitudes. So attitudes are things or opinions, how you think about the world. And we actually also model that with an Ising-type network model. The idea is that your attitude consists of nodes. You need nodes, and let's talk about meat eating, for instance. Your meat eating attitude consists of a network of behaviors, feelings, and beliefs. And feelings are things like you like the taste of chicken, or you feel very sorry for these animals in the meat industry. Beliefs are that you think it's bad for climate, and all kinds of opinions you have about meat eating. And behaviors are actually whether you have lettuce juice, whether you eat meat, eat fish. So you have a whole constellation of behaviors, feelings, and beliefs that connect to meat eating. And somehow this is a network of things. And actually, of course, this is quite abstract because we cannot really see these nodes, but that's our theoretical model. But basically what we then assume is that these nodes are, to make it simple, binary. You have lettuce juice or not, you eat fish or not. The nodes have some interactions, that these can be direct or non-directed interactions, that not that important in the end. And they have some thresholds. So each of these nodes have some basic threshold to be in some state. I might find the taste of chicken really fantastic, even though I, on a cognitive level, think that meat eating is a bad thing. So this node has a tendency to stay in that field, and it can also be, in addition, an external field, like a social field, a government campaign, or just all your friends don't eat meat and you eat meat, and then there is some kind of external force, and like we have an external magnetic field on the system. So this is kind of metaphor, but actually, we have shown in a number of papers that this really explains this formalization as a randomized random field Ising model helps to explain many basic effects that we have found in social psychology about attitudes. So that's actually our model of the agent. And we also like this one because under some general assumptions, it can be shown that this Ising network behaves, and the mean field behaves as a Gus catastrophe. I'm a big fan of catastrophe theory, another topic. But it's well known that the mean field can be described as a Gus, and then in that case, the splitting variable of this Gus is the inverse temperature, and the normal variable of this Gus is the external field. So we can understand the whole magnet and also the Ising model of attitudes by just understanding what external fields and temperature do. And we translate, by the way, inverse temperature, beta to involvement and attachment, involvement and attention to the topic. So the idea is that if you are really involved in your attitude, then you will be in the front of this gust, and then it will be, that means a cool down magnet. That means that you will have a very discrete, radicalized attitude. It will be very extreme, and the less involved you are, the less you care about it, the more random the skins behave, and the more also more continuous your overall attitude behaves. And also the more easily it is to influence this attitude with external information. I don't go into that too much, but we have shown that this actually, this also discussed presentation. We also have data for this to show that this is an interesting way to understand individual attitudes. But now we go to the level of the social physics again. So now the consequence of this is that if you now make a social system of these agents, then you get a network of networks. So I have my attitude network, and that's embedded in a social network. So now we all have some network for or meat-eating opinion, and now we are going to communicate. So we have a network of networks, and that's quite complicated to study. So what we do in practice here is that we don't study a network of networks, but we use this mean field to the cusp, and then we study a network of cusps. So that's actually our trick. So we assume that we can describe this attitude with this cusp catastrophe, and then yeah, we get a network of cusps. So that's our agent-based model of what we integrate. There's an alternative for the existing models.
So each agent has only one parameter, just the attention, or
no? You have an information position. Yeah, you have an information position. So that's actually the sum of all these local thresholds. So that's your information position. I also said like yeah, the information position. So this is just the collective of all your inputs on the beliefs and feeling and the attention. How important you think this whole thing is, and that means you are somewhere in your cusp here. So you might be a convinced vegetarian or a convinced meat eater, but it could also be that you don't care about the whole thing and you are on the way to discuss. And what we then of course have to do is to think, yeah, what happens now when we interact? And our model works like this: if we interact, then our information will change. I will tell you something, you tell me something. So our position on the x-axis, the information axis changes. Attention changes because of the fact that we interact, or involvement generally increases. So we both change our positions on attention and involvement. And sometimes this might lead to a base transition. Normally nothing happens, of course, but very occasionally this might just put you over the edge and turn you into a vegetarian.
Okay. Just a question on the technicals. In the implementation of the IC model, the interaction of each instance has the same as signal, or you change the distribution of the interaction as well? I
go to that now.
Okay.
Because indeed, now you have to say something about the interactions. And of course, you can make many choices, and I've talked a long time about it. So in the model, it goes now. Okay, my gusts are gone, but you have seen the picture before. So we have some basic assumptions about what happens now if we interact. And the first one actually is that we have some networks. So we can take many different types of topologies. I tried many different things. It doesn't matter too much. It can be a grid or some stochastic block model. But the probability that I start an interaction about a topic, so I talk to you about meat eating or Ajax or the weather or whatever, depends on my involvement. If I don't care about it, I will not initiate an interaction. I initiate interaction as a weighted probability, and the weighting is with the involvement itself. So the idea is you don't start discussions about things you care about. The second one, involvement, and that's very important, is something that generally decays, because involvement or attention is a limited capacity. And you can be involved in 5 things or 10 things in politics and whatever, sports, etc. But it's a limited thing. You have to read the newspapers or follow the news. So there's a competition here going on. So involvement is a competition, and it means that if you don't do anything about it, involvement will slowly decrease. but it increases again by interactions. So if we talk about it, if we're going to talk about meat eating, yeah, we get both involved by the interaction itself. So involvement is something that decays slowly, but by interactions it jumps up again. And that's basically all. And the last one is actually that if we talk, we average information, but there's also a little weighting there by involvement. The idea is that if I'm very involved in meat eating, you're not, then if you talk, you probably move a bit more to me than I move to you. So these are my assumptions, and I show you, I don't know what time it is. I go slow or? Oh, I'm fine. Okay, yeah, these are, it's just the one way to formalize these equations so that you can put it actually in a simulation. So this is all simulation research. And one scenario I developed is the Black Peat scenario. But the Black Peat scenario is the idea that we are a population 20 years back in the Netherlands, and almost everybody was slightly in favor of Black Peat, but we didn't really care about it. It was just a child party thing, and so we thought, hey, Black Peat, whatever, and we were all liking Black Peat a little bit. But then activists came in the system, and activists are people, of course, by definition, highly involved and very against the Black Peat thing. And if you then think about simulation, yeah, then these people, of course, start interactions. They are highly involved, so they are starting to all these conservative people. And they also win the debates because they are highly involved. They have lots of information. They thought about it, so if they talk to me, then like, oh yeah, good point. I also move to your position. So the naive expectation would be that this activism quickly spreads over the population. And now one way to show this is here. So here I made some social network, in this case a stochastic plot model with some communities. The little blue ones, little means no attention or low involvement. And red is activists and blues are the conservatives. And if I let it run here, you see the original go. You see a typical run. So you see that activism first spreads really quickly, but you also get at some point anti-activism. So these are people that are also highly involved with the opposite position. And that's quite unique for this model. And it happens because of these cusp properties. So what happens here is shown here. What happens is that you have these activists, these were people that were highly involved. So on the front of this cusp being high attention and on the extreme position. And the conservatives that were on the back of the cusp, they didn't care about it and a bit on the other side. And what happens here in the simulation that a certain percentage fraction of the conservatives moves indeed to the activist position, so they are converted activists. But some actually, they move to the upper part of this cusp. So in the Pittsburgh bifurcation, they take the wrong path in view of, according to the activists, and they become anti-activists. So these people, the involvement increases so fast that, there's this change in information, it's not working, and they become anti-activists. And then they're also going to talk to everybody, and then you get a very polarized community. So this effect is unique for this model, and there's another way. I already summed up 4 or 5 mechanisms for polarization, but this is one more.
A quick question. So the activists from the start have this characteristic of being highly involved.
Yeah.
But the anti-activists, they emerge, or are they also from the start?
No. They were conservatives. They started here on the back, and they were lonely, but because they interacted, because they actually talked to them. And what happens in these persons that as a function of this interaction, their involvement increased faster than that the information position changed. And that causes them to take the wrong path in the split for bifurcation.
I have a question more in the involvement, because you mentioned that the involvement is analogous to the inverse of temperature.
Yeah.
And in the icing simulations, you basically do these Monte Carlo steps, but for every spin, you compute the probability for a fixed temperature. But
No, that's different here. Temperature here is now actually individual thing.
So then,
but the metaphor breaks down here.
Yeah. I see. So in the end, it's a similar icing simulation, but in every spin you have different temperatures.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you can still talk about some overall temperature in the system, but in principle now temperature is a spin-specific
I see.
variable. Yeah.
Okay, that's
And that's because the spins are not spins anymore. The spins are now whole gust. So that's quite a difference. It's not so compared to the icing opinion model, which then people are just little spins.
Yeah, exactly.
And now each spin is actually a whole gust. So that's quite a difference.
I see.
Yeah.
What do you mean with unique here? Do you mean that you were the first, or?
Yeah, I didn't because now you have hysteresis and pixel bifurcations within an agent.
Because I would say
I've not seen that in any opinion model. So.
Because I would say every system that had hysteresis would show this kind of.
No, okay.
But you defer to me.
I think I propose it to us.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, you talk about history and so on. It brings to mind, well, what happens in an icing or in many phase transitions is the phenomenon of nucleation, where you need a critical mass, a critical nucleus of a number of activists. A single activist will not do it. You need to have critical mass. So, do you see similar things?
No, I think I can do this already with two nodes, the basic principles here. Okay, that's because I think you have this whole curse in the agent. I have to think about this. There will be certain properties. Now, one property actually I go to. Let me show you one simulation. Yeah. Okay. I'm a fan of NetLogo. Not everybody, but I think so. I built the whole system also NetLogo actually only and one other simulation. So one simulation I can now show you. Now it's of course in a grid. So this is the black P thing again. Oh, don't button. It's always if you do this for the group, I have to first set up. So I do the setup black Pete. Go. Now I am in this conservative state. I can now add activists. And you see that these activists are spreading now. So this is now on the lattice, but you see that at some point you get this roundly actually you get this anti-activist becoming really strong. So at some point here you see also the opinion distribution here becoming bimodal. So this is another way to run this black Pete simulation. But another one I like that is this one. So now I have a similar situation. It's called the meat-eating vegetarian. It's also in my paper. I'm a meat-eating vegetarian. Somebody people think that's a laughable thing, but
I recently learned that this is supposed to be called a reducitarian.
But here I do something strange, but it's also to get another prediction of the model. So what I do here is that I say, I now also added this bounded confidence to the model. So I now have the blue ones are meat eaters and the red ones are vegetarians. And the red ones are also more involved. But the black P thing now doesn't work because the meat eaters don't want to talk to the vegetarian because I added bounded confidence here. It's over here, the bound is 0.2, so now there is a bound. So if I now run it, it's already running, nothing happens actually, because people just don't communicate, so nothing happens. And now I'm going to do something strange. I have here button perturbate activist. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to push the vegetarians to the meat eating phase. So actually you have to see this like this. So this might be the situation of this vegetarian sitting here. I push the vegetarian to this state.
Send them to South America.
And the idea is that because of this recent effect, the person it looks a bit like this. So I push the person here. It's a stochastic system. So at some point the person will jump back to this vegetarian state. But the idea is that when he is in this state, now he can talk to the meat eaters. And his information position is still vegetarian. So the only thing I'm now going to do is push vegetarians to the meat eat state. And you see it happen, so it becomes blue first, and then the activist wins. So you push it, you see it here that I push them actually to the meat-eater state, but then if you let it run, that is a very effective trick in this model to get everyone in the activist state. And that's a counterintuitive thing, because I push them in the other direction and you get in the end this one. So actually we are thinking now, here is in parts of this, to think about experiments to actually find evidence of this prediction. But of course, there are certain things we all know. For instance, it's always a good idea if you are some left-wing activist to wear a very nice suit and go to some meetings, and people believe you much more than you have this Palestinian thing around the neck. So this is basically, but we are thinking about actually ways to test it.
But what does it mean? It's like just
to give
the idea.
Then you should work, and now everybody wants to talk to you. And then in the meantime, you tell people all these terrible things about the industry, etc. So that's what
So you eat meat for the cause.
Yeah,
yeah, it's great to be a meat-eater and vegetarian, I must say.
So why is this happening? Because of the increased involvement or something like that?
No. It happens because if I push them to the meat-eating state, their opinion or their behavior is actually meat-eating, but the underlying information position is still vegetarian. And now they can talk to the meat-eaters, and they exchange, and they are highly involved. So they are then at that point eating burger, but at the same time now I can tell people all this information about how bad the meat industry is. So the bound is then gone. I'm surpassing this bound confidence.
So but in terms of the cost, you're in the highly involved, very stable cost and application, and then by talking to the vegetarian, you move over to the other side somehow. You actually go to the more involved side. No, less involved side.
No. So this is actually the state of the vegetarian. So he's in the vegetarian state, but there's still some stability in the meat eating state. And by hand I push them in this state, and you will stay there sometime, but because of noise you will jump back. But in the meantime, when you're here, you can talk. Suddenly, the meat eaters, you overwin this bound confidence state, so you now can talk to the meat eaters.
Yeah, but how do the meat eaters then change their position?
Because they get this information of the information position change.
But then we're highly in this enormous stable cost regime that you.
No, the meat eaters are still on the back of the cusp.
But
because they're not so involved.
No,
they actually have to
this
go down.
This completely fails when the meat eaters are also high involved.
Yes.
So when there is already polarization, this doesn't work anymore.
I see. Okay.
like if you make an analogy with the icing or the phase transition thing, it's like you putting everyone in a match stable position, and then you small perturbation will go back to your very dark position.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot to say about this model, but a few of the things I want to tell you. We like this model for different things. So we like this discussion about involvement and persuasion, but I leave this now out because I want to go to some new ideas that I will put on the table. So I always like to say that I don't like my own model because it's too simple and also because it's too complex. And it's both true. Of course, it's too simple because many other things, like other mechanisms of polarization, media, effective polarization, in-group outgroup effects, and they should actually all be added to get a realistic model, but you already see that then it could get completely out of hand. So it's quite hard to deal with that. And the other big thing I don't like, and that's what I want to go into, is that in the cusp model, there is no intermediate stable state. So now it says that whenever we get more and more involved, you have this pitch for polarization because and also of course in the magnetization case. So this is this, if you increase attention or involvement or you decrease the temperature of a magnet, it polarizes into extreme states. And that means that whenever you get really into something, this in between state becomes unstable. And that might be true, but it's a bit of a cynical view of involved people. So I was thinking about, can we have a model where there's an in-between state? So I will say something about that first. And there is something, but then we have to move to a more complicated icing type model, and that's actually the three critical icing model. And we try to get into this, but it's not that simple. But there's actually a really nice paper by Irene Ferry. I tried to get here to give a talk here in January, February about this model. And there you have different types of model. You have the Bloom-Capell model, the Bloom-Everett-Griffith model. There's a whole family of models actually here, but they all have the same idea. And this idea is that now we have three spin values, -1, 0, and 1. And they are not arbitrary because 0 has a very special meaning. 0 is actually kind of preferred state. It's a neutral state, and it's expensive to be in a -1 state or in the 1 state. But having neighboring spins in the same state, is -1, -1, or 1, 1, is actually a good thing for the energy state. So the Hamiltonian is looking like this. And actually the colors here show the state. So it's good to have -1, 1, -1 or 1, 1. Of course, if they inconsistent state, that's a bad thing for the energy. But also being in the non-zero state is something that you can running shift this alpha parameter. So now you have an extra parameter, alpha. So you still have temperature. They leave out the external field normally in these papers. And then you can look at the bifurcation diagrams. This is the case for the mean field for the fully connected case. And then you can show that alpha, this punishment or reward for being in the zero state versus temperature, you get a quite complicated bifurcation set. And it is a quite critical point. So there is here, actually this is a continuous phase transition, here is a discontinuous phase transition. And here they come together at the three critical point. And then you can have the case that the equilibrium surface looks like this. So there will be three possible, three alternative possible states in this case. And that's a three critical model. And that's interesting because now we could have also for high, low temperature, high, in my case, high involvement, there could be intermediate stable state. So that's what we're working on. But to make it feasible, it's important to make the same link. So in the icing model, we made this link to the Kusk catastrophe. The Kusk catastrophe is an easy to understand equation. But we also know that in the Kusk catastrophe, that was this equation there, the two parameters in this equation are equal, or they're directly related to the temperature and the external field parameter. So it's a very simple one-to-one mapping. Now we try to understand how the parameters of this three critical model map to certain parameters. And I like to make the same link. So that you can, it's probably the case, I have found this very obscure Indian paper where they say that the three critical model is actually the butterfly catastrophe, which is this not x to the, this is actually an x to the power 4 potential function. And this is then an x to the power 6 potential function, which is known as the butterfly catastrophe. And there you have four parameters, A, B, C, and D. And I'm still trying to figure out how these parameters, A, B, C, and D, how they relate to the parameters of the three critical model. That's one big question. The other question, of course, do these parameters somehow again translate to psychological parameters? Now we have an additional parameter, alpha. How does alpha, what was the psychological interpretation of this parameter? How we have to think about it? So that's all open questions that we now work on. And I like to take up in the coming time.
Sorry, shouldn't that be the first question would be, why did you introduce zero in the first place?
Yes, and that's because, that's a good point. That really goes back to the measurement of attitude. So normally, you all filled in questionnaires about attitudes in your life, and then you often have this zero option. Then you get, what do you think about meat eating, against, for, or no opinion or don't care, or so we always have this scale. So often these scales go from -3 to 0 to 3. That is the famous Likert scales that we use in psychology. So this one totally agree to totally disagree, and in the middle is then this middle option. And psychologists already for a long time worried about the middle option. What does it really mean to say that it doesn't mean don't care, don't know, middle opinion? Zero is quite a strange thing in the measurement of these attitudes. And there's a lot to say that actually zero is the cheapest, in terms of energy, the cheapest position to take. And we also think about systems where, okay, let's keep it like that. So we have we try to lead this back to basic discussions in the measurement of psychological constructs. And then indeed, zero is not an arbitrary, and you cannot scale it away. Zero is really something special because it's this famous don't care or don't have an opinion option. Actually, another line that we have here that we also are working on that I like to mention here is that we now think, and so we were quite successful in taking the Ising model and develop this into psychological theory and also actually to statistics. So we have shown that actually this is not a complete table, but we can, for the Ising model, we can make this translation to psychological process, link it to psychological phenomena, but we also have tools to fit the Ising model to data and actually even to translate it to existing psychometric models in psychology, like the IRT models that are very famous. And now we are thinking a bit about, can we take different measurement scales in psychology, like, and this is then this Bloom-Capell model, where it's -1, 0, 1. Can we do the same thing? So what's the mean field equation? What are the Glauber dynamics? Which are the phenomena in this model? How can we translate them to psychological phenomena? And also, can we then fit this model to data? Because psychologists always like to fit things to data. And that we like to do for any, the POTS model, the XY model. We also work on an ordinal Ising model, and missing is now the continuous Ising model. So actually, we try to take all these basic models from statistical physics and see whether they translate to some known paradigm in psychology, but also to a statistical line in psychometrics.
Sorry, what do you mean by continuous Ising model? Because then it becomes continuous, becomes Heisenberg model or XY model in two dimensions.
Yeah, no, indeed. So I think the continuous Ising, that was just something that came up last week. So what exactly the continuous Ising? There's a little bit of literature about this, but it's the same Hamiltonian. But then X and Y, the spins have continuous value. Sorry?
That's Heisenberg model.
That's Heisenberg model, yeah.
Yeah, and that is so the 2D version of Heisenberg model, and that is ON model.
Okay, then I'm confused because I thought the Heisenberg model was a complication of the XY model.
Yes, these three variables that could be continued between -1 and 1 is the Heisenberg model. When you have two variables between -1 and 1, that's planar, is XY.
It's a dimension to a spin, It's basically one Heisenberg model.
Yeah,
we should talk about it.
Yeah.
We just thought that we need this also in our category, but you say it's, I will check this again.
Name info.
Yeah. No. But okay, that's one we like to add, and because that actually the continuous Ising model maps to a whole set of known statistical approaches that we already have, so it's nice to put it in. Okay. Let me say, okay, last thing. The other thing that I didn't like, I said the model that I proposed is too simple, and it's also too complex, and it's too complex in the sense that you cannot do anything analytically. So we also thought, and I did it with Sid Redland, to think about simplifying it to a model where you can do actually analytical things, and then we go back to the photo model. So we go back to this case of leftist people, left people, centrist people, and right people. That was the model that Sid Redland already developed. And now we add involvement to the idea. So the idea is that people in the center, they have low involvement, and people on the extremes have high involvement. This means that when centrist people talk to leftist people, they move to that position. That's basically it. So, and actually, these people don't talk to each other like it was. But at the same time, there's decay. As I said, involvement is expensive. So there's also and this happens during interactions, but there's also a spontaneous decay back to the central position because involvement is an expensive thing and you get bored about your own extremist position. And that's the case, then we still have this involvement dynamics. This is the basic idea about involvement, and then you can do some analytical thing. We just made a start with this, and I will not go into this too much. You can actually extend this to have multiple positions. So you have extreme of 2 levels, 2 plus 2 plus 1, and etc. So you have 5 positions, and then you can, for instance, say that people, when 2 plus 1 people talk, they have to probably move to a more extreme state. So there's one tendency to go to extreme states by interactions, but there's a general decay back to the middle position. And then if you you can simulate this in different ways, and you can, for instance, also show in this case that you can get 3 modal distributions. That's the result I have now. But then I found out that actually in the field of chemical, so maybe you know about it, so you have all kinds of reaction diffusion type of approaches with all kinds of matrices. And probably there's a way to do this much more general, and then I stop. Yeah, that's actually I think one approach is here the quasi-species model. Okay.
Yeah, one quick thing. I mean, I was actually so this left centrist learning model looks very similar to this tricritical model, not so because it also has these 3 positions.
Yes.
So
yeah, there's also links. So there are people having developed the tricritical model. There are three papers I think about it, having the tricritical model as an opinion model directly now. Yeah, that's really yes. Yeah. Okay, let's go to my final slide.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Oh yeah, so hi everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not there. You guys are more brave than I am with the storm and stuff. But I was wondering, why is there a need for translating these models specifically to psychology? Because I feel like the mechanisms you're describing are rather general, right? So specifically, for example, the nice simulation you showed where there was a bimodal distribution emerging.
Yeah.
That's partly also due to the fact that it's like a planted partition, right? If I were to simulate an Ising model on a planted partition, I would get similar results.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm wondering then, like, okay, there's an interpretation question, right? We apply this to psychology, and then we can use it as a thinking tool to say, like, okay, how would this work? But I think it's like another step to say, like, okay, these are actually mechanisms within psychology.
In the sense that I'm not sure where you're going, but maybe you go to the same, because I should stop and I'll go to one of my slides. Oh shit.
Yeah, I think where I'm going is that like the Ising model was originally developed to understand the behavior of magnets, right? And then it's applied to many different forms, like in voter models specifically. And but I wouldn't say that an Ising model you can really use to predict when the next election sway is going to be, right? It's just more like a abstract tool.
No, so that's actually a big discussion. So this slide is about this. There's already in the paper of Castellano that I like so much. There's already a discussion about this, what he calls a striking imbalance between empirical evidence and theoretical models. And actually, he already talks about an explosion of models at that time. That was 2009, and since then, there's an explosion of models. And the problem is indeed that there is actually a lot of empirical data, but the data is not specific enough to distinguish between all models. So there is evidence for all kinds of types of polarization, but actually any model explains it. So we are looking for data that really distinguish between models, and that's actually a big challenge. And I think in my case we have some things that we really can show that's actually quite unique for this model. Because we also have psychological phenomena, we have phenomena at the psychological level and at the social level, and that helps actually that gives you more data to distinguish between models. But that's a big challenge here, and that will also a big challenge in our RPA when we start. So in the RPA, if we get the money, then this will be a big thing. So we always will have this question about what's the complexity of the models we build, and at the same time, how can we really connect it to data that really are unique evidence for this specific model that we then develop. That will be, I think, a big challenge for this RPA that we start.
Would not be reframing based on your two last comment and the question that then if all the models fit the data, you as a physicist you look for the simplest one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's also the reason why we tend to like simple models, but in the end, I do think we can solve this actually. And actually, now Martin sitting here, I didn't put your data in here. We are looking now at data for big data sets on this involvement. And actually, in many cases, all our hypotheses about the involvement don't seem to work, or there are much more complications than we thought of. So, if you really go to look in the data, there are often patterns that are inconsistent with the models. It's not the case that all data that we found are immediately consistent with all models. So, we also have data that are inconsistent with all models. So, that's a way of having hope, but it is the case. Yes.
I have a question, just curiosity, because in these models that you have a population of activists and they can convince. So I'm coming more from physics background. Is there a way that you can engineer the number of activists that you come towards a certain outcome? Because in physics we put external field, we can bias in some way. I'm asking because I'm really interested because we have dictatorships in the world, and you want to get rid of them, and you want to know how you can engineer a right number of mobilizers, what factors you can change that we put on a certain direction?
You can to some degree. So Iris is working, she's a PhD student on this topic. We work together with a company and they have a system where they let people interact. So they get people in the system, they all fill in some questionnaires, then you know their positions. And then they are pairwise coupled to talk to each other. And there you can actually manipulate who talks to who, and you can make certain groups. To some degree, we can do this, but not of course at the level of precision that we know in physics.
The conclusion, you have models, so you just need to put the right attribute, what are the dominant factors, and then you can just control it by the question. I don't know if you have said the effect of the population of the activists. If you increase the number of activists, what happens? Or have you looked at this? Or
I'm not completely sure that
is that what we do? We do actually, we just change the parameters. Just
And now, and to come back also to the question of Casper, of course, the biggest problem is, of course, that the trick of physics is, of course, that you have sometimes quantitative predictions. So you really come to the point, you say, okay, a temperature, whatever, 6 point, and then a lot of digits. Here, the first order, second order transition happens. That will never happen in more fields. So we only have these qualitative aspects. So we have the principal variation, we have hysteresis, we have free criticality. That's the level where we do predictions and estimate. We will never, I'm afraid we never get to this point. Okay, now we have one more activist, and then we predict how things are going to change. I'm afraid that is really, and actually in biology this is also quite rare. Only in physics. Physics is a bit of a rare outlier here.
The biology is going in that direction, but I did that the biological and sociological system are more complex. So because you can put something in your model, but then the real living system behaves differently.
Yeah, it's more complex.
What you should be able to predict.
Yeah.
In reality, it's different.
Let's have hope that we get to that point. Sure. Okay, I think we should. Oh yeah, I see your boss, but
we can do another round of questions.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Comments also.
Because you say you both coming in 2 weeks. So it seems if you go to the literature of statistical physics to contribute to explosion of formal models, that if you look for the frustrated Ising models, you get like it's one of the more diverse Ising models you can have. Like and it's very close to the Bloom and McGriff's model that you show.
Okay.
It's just that in normalizing models have ferromagnetic interaction and anti-ferromagnetic interaction, like the J is positive or negative, and that induces your phase.
Okay.
But in the frustrated one, you have a combination of both.
Okay.
And then by playing with the combination of both, you have all the phases that you mentioned in your talk in one model.
Okay, good. I will do that. Yeah.
But I never heard anyone doing this in social physics. If it's
no, okay. As we get the money, we should really prepare. We should have quite some meetings to talk all these possibilities. Of course.
And I know that was my first paper was in that frustrating model. You can get everything.
Yes.
Do you take into account in some way the interactions among different attitudes, not just one at a time?
No, that's not a limitation of current model. So now in the model, we only have one attitude. There are many people and we all have one attitude, and that's of course not a big limitation. That's why I like the extra lot model, because there you have people have many properties, so they could have many attitudes. And now all people have one attitude in my model, and that's big limitation. But yeah, it's already complicated. So, but we are thinking about it. But it's not so easy to think about what multiple attitudes actually are in the system. So that's another open question, and actually it's a completely open question. So it is IC type of approach that we have to think about attitudes, having multiple attitudes. And of course, you can have. Sometimes you have multiple attitudes, and it's clear that the same nodes they are related because the same nodes are in different attitudes. Like your opinion about climate, your opinion about meat eating, they share certain nodes. But yeah, there's also some kind of hierarchy. And of course, if you really think about it, people's attitudes are really strange because people even have opinions about their own attitudes. So they think they are a meat-eating vegetarian, and that's another node in the network. So there's all kinds of strange loops happening in here. So we try to keep it simple, but there are lots of complications that you can condemn. And I think the multiple attitude thing is one of the biggest missing links in our approach.
Did you come across? Did you come across in your review of models of inequality?
No, I think look, no, that's another. So I leave out. Actually, I didn't. So
you didn't.
No, but there should be. Actually, that's I think my mistake. There should be.
So in one of the last slides, you showed something with this trimodal distribution.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking was, how are you modeling this? Is this just some sort of, we have this 3 time step, and every time step, every person in the system updates its opinion or not? Or because you also compared it with these ODE simulations, but I was not really sure where these ODEs.
No, yeah, so that's I understand that's confusing. So if I talk about the ODEs, I was talking about the social network, the social network. So each person was cursed. And ODE, the curse is described as ODE. So that's the level of the agent, the dynamics of the agent within this social network model. If I talk about the 3 critical model, I'm back to this model of the individual. So now I think that your nodes, so your position about meat eating can have 3 values. So it's minus 1, 1, or so that's the assumptions are on the level of how this individual network works. The way we do it then, there are 2 ways, of course. You can see this dynamically, and then we do some global dynamic approach. So there's just an updating of the states. You can just start somewhere and then look for the equilibrium distribution. But of course, you can also use the mean field under certain. It's not where you're going.
Yeah, because if they are just discrete states and they just get updated every time, isn't then the endpoint? Isn't that just you're effectively doing sort of Markov chain? Yeah. And isn't then the endpoint just a stationary distribution of the Markov chain?
Yeah, but the stationary distribution can be trimodal.
Yeah, that's true. That's fine.
Yeah. So that's true.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this means that if you meet eating if you are involved person in this thing according to this model, and then your meat eating attitude will be probably in some equilibrium state. But this can be a bi-stable state or you would treat it.
But at least that's numerically very cheap to compute. You just set up rules, you just use the eigenvector and
assuming that you have a fully connected depending on certain assumptions. And then we also talk about small networks. So indeed, computationally, this is not as big. So I'm more worried about the fundamental theoretical aspects of it. So translating these parameters to psychological approaches. That's a bigger challenge actually than the technical stuff.
Just coming back to the frustration, in that case of the Bloom-Emery-Griffith models, the alpha has the same interpretations because the first term of your Hamiltonian is like a favors alignment, and the second term favors anti-alignment. So basically, you compete the attention. So one part of the model wants to align, the other parts want to oppose. So it could have even the same name, frustrations. What's the alpha?
We should actually look at it. For me, this is really hard literature to get in. For the Ising model, there are a lot of popular books that you can read as a psychologist and then you get into it. This is only hardcore physical papers, and I get completely lost all the time. So probably you can help me out.
It'd be nice.
There's many of the models you showed are, or can be approximated by some Markov chain, probably. Or just
you can almost always.
So, but we are people with memories. So, and Markov memory does. So, how good is that approximation in practice, or is it just simplicity, or? Or
good point. That's a good point. So, and that we have one paper on this, actually not finished, but that's about the learning, what we call the learning Ising model, and then there's learning in the systems. And actually, the learning Ising model, and that means that you take the Ising model, and then the weights between the connections actually are continuous, and they can be changed as a learning process. And if you put a HEP rule on this, and the HEP rule is the learning rule that you say that fire together wires together. And it turns out that the Ising model with the HEP learning rule is actually what is called the Boltzmann machine. And the Boltzmann machine is one of the root models in AI. And then you can have deep learning Boltzmann machine. It's one of the favorite models of Hinton. And then you get into all this whole AI literature on learning on Boltzmann machines. And I have this, also have to solve this. I put everything on the table. So that's something we look at, but we also were a bit worried to see that now we opened a whole can of worms of AI models. That's another thing to think about.
To what about say, if you change the J to a random variable, that could be anything positive and negative, then you get these memories. There's a new model for check as a spin glasses. It's like you got everything.
So the spin glass models are actually, they have memory. So that's one way to think about neural networks.
I was wondering, so in your attitude model, you treat the person at a mean field level and then have interaction between the different mean fields. But can you refine this in the sense that, my interaction with you is going to maybe change my rational beliefs, but not my emotions? For instance, that you really couple to a specific internal node, the interaction. And then see what that does to your attitude or your people that do
it would, it's certainly interesting to think about. I don't see an easy way to do this and keep the model simple, but And one of the things that we get more and more the idea that also, for instance, involvement is much more complicated than we thought until now. So there seems to be emotional involvement, and that's something different than, say, more belief type involvement. So at some point we should also adapt the model based on our empirical results, which are partly inconsistent with the model we now have. So that's another thing to think about it. Actually, one simplification that we got that I put in Yeah, so one simplification that we're also looking at that seems to work quite well is to get rid of involvement as an explicit variable in the model we just discussed, and that's by saying that just the number of connections you have in certain topics, that's actually involved. Actually, you could say involvement is just a property of the network itself, and then that actually simplifies the model because then involvement is out of the equations and part of the dynamics of the network. And some students already did this, and it seems to me that the black peak thing then still happens. Actually. But that's something that we should do better at some point.
Any more questions? I was wondering, so if you want to actually compare these kind of things with data, for example, the sort of peak discussion or black peak discussion, to what extent is space relevant? Because I mean, you really see the big cities are very much empty, and then the small towns are prone. Like
that's a very confusing thing. So you need to put in somehow what is the social network we live in. And that's a very complicated thing, and it's not really clear. And social network, and on the one hand, because of internet now, the social network has no spatial dimension anymore. You can just talk to anyone in the world. At the same time, it's quite clear that people are really sensitive to people that they just live near. So this locality is still very important. You still believe your neighbor much better than some random guy on the internet. So it's and then we have media, so media has another impact, and to put this all in, so now I think the stochastic block model is the most realistic, as a kind of approximation of all this, but that's not a big information.
So on other networks, you see the same?
In the paper we wrote that we did the same thing based for the lattice, for the stochastic block model, and on the scale-free network, and the black peak thing is happening in all these three topologies.
But if you just use sort of diffusion approach, it just takes space continuous, and at every point you have.
Yeah, that's also. It's not my fault. Your lunch is late, but it's not my fault.
I mean, I had a more philosophical question, and this is about the model building per se. So and you started off with this simple model, and then you make it more complex.
Yeah.
But what is exactly the philosophy behind it? Because in physics, you want to have the simplest possible model that can explain the phenomenon.
Yeah.
But not simpler than that, but also not very much more complex than that, because then you add things that might be not important. So how do you view this?
That's the biggest dilemma, of course. So for me, this is just. So it's safe to say that psychology and all social sciences are still in an initial state of development. So compared to physics or any natural sciences, we are trying to find ways to get in, and also that's a measurement thing. So our measurement devices are still quite weak. We have but we also have a theoretical problem in terms that we have lots of verbal models in psychology. There are tons of verbal models, and formalizing them in this way is at least one approach. But then what wide level of simplification is, I really don't know. For my personal work is more or less a random walk through all these options and hoping that at some point you find a model that really brings something unique. I really believe in simple models, but if you talk to psychologists and empirical people, they probably also have this in biology, they're always irritated because they want all these variables in, and they want all stuff in there because it's important. So it's quite a dilemma. So if you make it too simple, then they get really irritated. But if you make it too complicated, you have parameter space that nobody understands anymore. So I have not, but I think finding the right level of simplicity is actually the biggest question here.
Talk about the data then. Is that like a controlled situations to create this data, or you get data from like a society?
All kinds of data. So we work on, we are going to develop quite lab studies where we put people in the lab and are going to let them interact in a controlled way. But for instance, Martin is now looking at big online data sets, big list. We build white panels where people are listing their attitudes, and we also have measures of involvement. So there we check this on these large data sets, we look for different patterns. If we're going to get money, then we will also talk to CBS, and then we try to get then we have CBS data where people actually live. And then, yeah, if we can then also add some attitude or opinion type data, then we really can bring these things together. But that's another big challenge, actually, to find not only the right level of modeling, but then also make this intelligent connection to data. Is not a big issue, and also mostly unsolved in my view. And everybody is working there. So, and there is no university that does not have some polarization lab where they collect massive amounts of data. And yeah, it seems that everybody's working on this, but I must say that big steps are still, yeah, we didn't solve polarization. That's quite clear.
Yeah, but I mean, connected to this, so now you rely on external data, and you also mentioned lab experiments.
Yeah.
But from the model, can you actually find out what the model predicts with respect to something? Another model, a competing model.
One simple.
An hypothesis.
Yeah.
Is that something that?
Yeah. So one, where is the slide? Yeah. And so one simple thing that follows from this model is that if you can manipulate attention and information in subjects, then according to the model, it's absolutely important to first manipulate information and then manipulate attention. And so first I have to change your information position, and then I have to tell you that it's really important. And not the other way, because I first tell you that it's very important, then you polarize already, and then you are insensitive to information. So that's quite unique for this model, and that's something you can actually test. Okay? So if you're a climate activist, what they often do is that first they tell you that the climate is a very urgent problem, and then they try to give you information. And according to the model, it's better to do the other way around. And that's something you can just test. It is a typical experiment you can do in psychology by changing order of changing this, and then of course this goes for everything in psychology goes wrong first. So to get this really working, it will be a thing. But I think this is quite a unique prediction of the model, and it's something that we will go to test in the coming years.
Nice. Right. Okay, we have more questions. Let's take a time and then we are well on track for that.
Okay.